So, we're here to go over a couple tips and tricks of the handy dandy strap cutter today. Basically, it's a pretty basic tool. There's just a few things that you need to know to make it work like you want it to. Cutting straps with it can be a little frustrating as it'll get out of line sometimes. But there's a couple things you can do to ensure that it's not going to mess up a whole bunch of leather real quick. One trick that we've done to keep the width consistent, we've taken some light grit sandpaper and used some double-sided basting tape just to tape it along the top rails here, and that just allows the clamping device to hold on to it a little bit better for when your strap will get compressed in here and want to push the strap cutter out. So one thing you can do to make sure that you cut the straightest strip possible is to make sure you've got a good straight edge to begin with. You can't start cutting on a rough edge piece of leather with one of these strap cutters because it's made to follow the straight edge right along the flat side of the strap cutter. That's another thing to watch for. Sometimes you'll end up with your cutting side on the wrong end of the strap cutter. If you have your cutting side over here, there's not as much of a flat edge to follow. So you want to be sure it's on the flattest edge of your handle. Of course, your adjustment is up here. Loosen that, and you've got your guide right there. It'll cut up to a 4-inch strip. It's, of course, the wider strip you're trying to cut, the more difficult it's going to be. I wouldn't suggest cutting real thin leathers into real wide strips with this strap cutter. It's pretty difficult. Really, this strap cutter is made to be used with thicker leathers, stiffer leathers. You know, you can cut veg tan all the way down to 3/4 ounce. As long as it's got a little bit of body to it, it's not going to be too bad. The main thing to keep in mind whenever you're cutting thinner leathers with this strap cutter is to adjust your depth on the gap that's in the strap cutter here that your strap passes through. If you're cutting a 3 to 4 ounce piece of leather, you're not going to want that gap to be real wide. You're going to want that leather to just kind of barely squeeze through there, maybe even giving you just a little bit of resistance as you're trying to pull it through. The way to adjust that, you've got your knob over here, which will decompress this spacer and widen it out. If you loosen it, you're going to have to watch this side as well, because just loosening this side doesn't mean it's going to self-adjust on this side. What we'll do a lot of times is loosen it so it can move a little bit, and then you're going to want to pry that apart and try to make sure that is even all the way across, which it's not so much right now. See there, that'd be for cutting a real thick piece of leather. And then you want to squish it down if you're going with a thinner piece of leather. Tighten that back up. And just try to keep that gap even all the way across and appropriate for the thickness of leather that you're cutting. So we're going to go ahead and cut, let's say, a 2-inch strap. Now we've got a piece of 8 to 9 ounce vegetable tan double shoulder, and I'll show you how I'll run a strap off of it. One thing that helps keep the strip cutting straight is to keep your strap cutter, once you get it cutting, you can actually keep your strap cutter with a little bit of pressure tilting it downwards away from the leather, and by doing that it just kind of helps that strap cutter stay straight along the edge. You know, with this thick of leather, you don't have to worry too much about it compressing the leather and widening out. It does a pretty good job on its own, staying pretty even. As you can see there, I was holding the top edge of the leather with one hand, keeping tension on it, and using my right hand with the strap cutter to run along the edge and cut the strip. The biggest thing that'll cause problems for you with these things is having a dull blade. If you're ever in doubt, you're having trouble with it, always try changing the blade, especially if you're trying to cut thin leathers, especially with any kind of chrome tan or oil tan leather. You want the sharpest blade that you can to help it glide through there and stay even. Biggest thing is just going slow, paying attention, making sure you have a straight edge to begin with, and keeping that gap consistent with the thickness of your leather. If you're trying to cut anything below ½ inch or so, I would recommend just maybe using a straight edge and a razor knife and just cutting it by hand. It can get kind of tricky whenever you're cutting a real skinny piece of leather. I'll go ahead and show you, and we'll try to cut, say, a ½ inch strip. We'll tighten it down real good. And it's not real easy to do. You want to try and make sure and keep the pitch of this T here straight with your strap cutter. We'll just try to cut a piece of lace. Again, something I'll do is I'll have this thing tilted down, and that handle almost kind of dips underneath the edge of the leather like that, and that helps keep the leather pulling into the strap cutter instead of away. I did a pretty good job. If we were using any leather that was thinner than, say, a 4 to 5 ounce, it's going to get a lot harder pretty quickly. With that being said, that's about all the tricks I got for you. Good luck, be patient, and keep a sharp blade in it.